Well, again, the position is very similar. We want to maintain the benefits that we currently have within the customs union, but, you know, we want to have our cake and eat it, as do most parties in Westminster, in terms of being able to negotiate our own trade deals. So you and Boris Johnson
are on the same wavelength then?
Well, we need to be flexible. We've got to not cut our nose off to spite our face, and we reject the principle of no deal that the Conservatives have put
I'm not
forward.
asking about that. I'm asking for your position. Let me get this clear. Would you be prepared to sacrifice not being able to do free trade deals as a price for remaining in the customs union?
Well, we've got to be extremely flexible. We should be able to carry out and negotiate our own trade deals, and that's the ideal position to be in.
You can't do that in the customs union.
No, you can't do that in the customs union.
So are you in or are you out?
And that's why it's a point for negotiation, Andrew, because we want to retain the benefits of the customs union whilst also being able to negotiate trade deals as we see fit, and that will form part of the negotiations themselves. But we can't cut our nose off to spite our face and come out of the customs union without any transitional arrangements whatsoever and send businesses over the edge of a cliff.
But it seems that you do want to have your cake and eat it. You want to stay members of the single market, but not have the obligations that go with it. You want to stay in the customs union, but still be able to do free trade deals on your own, which flies in the very face of the principle of the customs union. I mean, your positions are untenable.
Well, that's the whole point of negotiations.
What, to be untenable?
Not untenable, to negotiate the position. Now, our end goal is to retain the benefits that we currently have as part of the customs union and the single market. Now, the machinery that we use to do that, whether it's through outside agreements or whether it's by negotiating some form of amended settlement as part of membership, that's a moot point, quite frankly, but we need to make sure that we have the same benefits.
All right. John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor, he says that people would interpret staying members of the single market as not respecting the result of the referendum. But you say it's an option to be kept open. Who's right?
Well, I think he's right in what he says. I think automatically it's assumed that once you leave the EU, you leave the single market. And I think that that generally is the case. I'd be surprised that we would be... Well, I'd be surprised that we would be able to negotiate any of the concessions that we want to make as remaining part of the single market as a member. Now, I'm not saying that that's not completely off the table, because stranger things have happened. But what we need to focus on is less on the machinery and more about the outcome. We need to make sure that we retain those benefits, and we've got to make sure we negotiate some form of agreement in order to deal with that.
But why would you keep an option open which, in John McDonnell's words, would not respect the result of the referendum?
Well, as I've said, the point is that people assume that once you leave the EU, you leave the single market. Now, it's quite clear on that. Now, that could be negotiated, but as I've said, it's extremely unlikely. But I wouldn't rule it out. I wouldn't rule anything out at this stage, because stranger things have happened, and this process so far has been extremely chaotic.
But you would have to decide your negotiating position. Simply saying we don't rule anything out is not a negotiating position.
No,
you would have to determine, and you could be handling these talks.
We're quite clear on what our negotiating position is. We want to retain. No, we are. We want to retain the benefits that we currently have as part of the customs union and the single market. Now, whether that's inside or outside, that's a moot point. That will remain part of the negotiations themselves. But we're leaving the EU. Brexit means Brexit. We're quite clear on that, and we respect the result of the referendum.
How can Brexit mean Brexit if you would still like to stay in the single market and the customs union? And you have said that impediment-free access to the single market would entail accepting some element of free movement. That's what you said, but your manifesto was categorical. Free movement would end after Brexit. Which is currently Labour policy, you or the manifesto?
No, the manifesto is quite clear that free movement would end. And the point that I was trying to... No, Andrew, the point that I was making at the time is that there are some areas that are extremely complex. For example, Euratom refers to the free movement of scientists. There's an extreme state of concern regarding Euratom and its position and the way that we'll be able to operate in terms of our energy industry in the UK. So the government has to look at things like that. There might have to be concessions that are made in certain areas like that in order to get an associative membership, for example. But the clear position overall is that free movement would end, and we're in favour of reasonable and managed migration. We're also not in favour of the current undercutting of wages, for example, through the Swedish derogation, and we want to see that end immediately, because we don't think that it's right that a company can source labour overseas and bring it to the UK and undercut current British employees.
heavy, rocky.